"I can't tell anyone about this, they'll think I'm crazy," whispered 42-year-old equipment manager Tony Rodriguez as he stood alone in the Thunder's equipment room at 2:30 a.m., staring at a basketball that shouldn't exist. For the past 3 seasons, Tony had been secretly preparing a special basketball for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's warm-up routine, a ball that required an elaborate 4-hour preparation process involving precise air pressure, specific temperature conditioning, and a mysterious ritual that Tony had developed through years of obsessive attention to detail. What started as Tony's personal quest for equipment perfection had evolved into something that Shai credited as the foundation of his shooting confidence, but it was also a secret so elaborate and specific that Tony was terrified someone would discover the lengths he went to create what players called the magic ball. What Tony didn't know was that his obsessive equipment preparation was about to be exposed in the most public way possible, and that revelation would transform how the entire NBA understood the connection between equipment precision and athletic confidence. But to understand how a simple basketball became the center of the most elaborate equipment ritual in professional sports, we need to go back to where this obsession began, with a perfectionist equipment manager who couldn't accept that good enough was sufficient for elite athletes. The date was August 14, 2021, and Tony Rodriguez was starting his first day as the Oklahoma City Thunder's head equipment manager. At 39 years old, Tony had worked for 3 different NBA teams over the past 15 years, building a reputation for meticulous attention to detail and an almost obsessive commitment to ensuring that every piece of equipment met the highest possible standards. Tony's approach to equipment management went far beyond what most teams considered necessary. While other equipment managers focused on making sure gear was clean, properly sized, and available when needed, Tony treated every basketball, every jersey, and every pair of shoes as a precision instrument that could affect athletic performance in measurable ways. "Equipment isn't just stuff that athletes use," Tony would explain to anyone who questioned his elaborate preparation methods. "Equipment is the interface between an athlete's skill and their performance. If the interface isn't perfect, even the best athlete can't reach their potential." This philosophy had made Tony valuable to organizations that understood the importance of details, but it had also earned him a reputation as someone whose standards were impossibly high and whose methods were unnecessarily complicated. When Tony arrived in Oklahoma City, he was determined to establish equipment standards that would support the Thunder's young core of developing players, particularly Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who was entering his 4th NBA season and establishing himself as the team's franchise cornerstone. But what Tony discovered during his first week on the job would reveal a level of equipment inconsistency that shocked him and set him on a path toward developing the most elaborate basketball preparation ritual in professional sports. During his initial assessment of the Thunder's equipment inventory, Tony discovered that the team was using basketballs with wildly inconsistent specifications. Some balls were inflated to 7.5 psi, others to 8.2 psi. Some had been stored in temperature-controlled environments, others in areas that experienced significant temperature fluctuations. Some balls had been broken in through proper use, others were being used straight out of the box without any preparation. "This is unacceptable," Tony said to himself as he examined a ball that Shai had been using during practice. "No wonder young players struggle with shooting consistency. They're practicing with equipment that changes characteristics every time they touch it." Tony immediately began developing protocols to ensure that every basketball met precise specifications for air pressure, temperature, surface texture, and weight distribution. But as he worked with Shai during those first weeks, Tony realized that even standard precision wasn't sufficient for a player of Shai's caliber and aspirations. However, what happened during Tony's first conversation with Shai about equipment preferences would begin the transformation of basketball preparation from routine maintenance into something approaching scientific precision. "Tony, I need to ask you something specific about the basketballs," Shai said after a practice session in Tony's second week with the team. "I've played with hundreds of different balls over the years, and I can tell when something feels exactly right versus when it's close but not perfect. Is there a way to make sure my warm-up ball feels exactly the same every single day?" Tony was impressed by Shai's sensitivity to equipment variations that most players wouldn't even notice. "Shai, what specifically do you notice when a ball feels right versus when it doesn't?" Shai thought carefully before responding. "When a ball is perfect, it feels like an extension of my hand. The grip is exactly right, the bounce is predictable, and my shooting rhythm flows naturally. When it's off, even slightly off, I have to compensate, and that compensation affects my confidence and timing for the entire practice." This conversation revealed to Tony that Shai possessed the kind of equipment sensitivity that would benefit from the most precise preparation possible. But it also presented a challenge that would require Tony to develop methods that went far beyond standard NBA equipment protocols. Shai, I can absolutely ensure that your warm-up ball meets exact specifications every day. But it's going to require some unconventional preparation methods. Are you willing to trust me to experiment with techniques that other teams might consider excessive? Shai's response would give Tony the permission he needed to begin developing what would eventually become known as the Magic Ball Protocol. Tony, I trust that you understand equipment better than I do. Whatever you think will help me perform at my highest level, I'm willing to try. Consistency is everything for a shooter, and if you can give me consistent equipment, that's one less variable I have to worry about. This conversation marked the beginning of Tony's quest to create the perfect basketball, a quest that would evolve into a 4-hour preparation ritual that combined scientific precision with what could only be described as equipment artistry. Tony began by researching the optimal specifications for basketball performance. He studied air pressure effects on bounce consistency, temperature influences on grip and feel, humidity impacts on surface texture, and even the effects of light exposure on synthetic leather characteristics. But Tony's research revealed that optimal specifications varied slightly depending on individual player preferences, shooting styles, and even psychological factors that affected how athletes perceived equipment performance. I can't just create one perfect ball, Tony realized after weeks of testing different combinations. I need to create Shai's perfect ball, one that matches his specific hand size, shooting mechanics, and psychological preferences. This realization led Tony to begin the most elaborate equipment customization project of his career. However, what Tony discovered as he developed Shai's personalized basketball preparation would require him to work in secret, because his methods were so unconventional that he worried other players and coaches would think he had crossed the line from equipment management into obsessive perfectionism. Tony's basketball preparation ritual began 4 hours before each practice or game. The process started with selecting a basketball that met Tony's basic specifications for weight, circumference, and surface texture. But from there, the preparation became increasingly elaborate and specific. First, Tony would condition the ball's air pressure using a precision gauge that measured to hundredths of a psi. But instead of simply inflating to a standard pressure, Tony had learned that Shai's optimal shooting performance occurred when the ball was inflated to exactly 7.78 psi, a specification so precise that most equipment managers would consider it meaningless. Next, Tony would condition the ball's temperature by storing it in a controlled environment set to exactly 72.3 degrees Fahrenheit for a minimum of 2 hours. This temperature conditioning ensured that the ball's surface material would have consistent grip characteristics regardless of the arena's ambient temperature. But the most unusual part of Tony's ritual involved what he called texture preparation, a process where he would handle the basketball for exactly 30 minutes, rotating it through specific patterns that wore the surface to a precise level of tackiness that matched Shai's grip preferences. I know this sounds crazy, Tony would tell himself as he performed this ritual in the early morning hours when no one else was in the arena, but Shai can feel the difference, and if he can feel it, it affects his performance. The final step in Tony's preparation involved what he had started calling energy charging, a process where he would dribble the ball exactly 100 times using the same rhythm and hand placement that Shai used during his warm-up routine. Tony had developed this technique after noticing that basketballs seemed to respond differently to the first player who used them extensively. By pre-programming the ball with Shai's specific dribbling patterns, Tony believed he was creating equipment that would feel familiar and responsive from the moment Shai first touched it. But what happened when Shai began using Tony's meticulously prepared basketballs would validate the effectiveness of this elaborate ritual and begin transforming Shai's shooting confidence in measurable ways. The first time Shai used one of Tony's fully prepared basketballs, his shooting percentage during warm-ups increased from his usual 78% to 91%. Initially, both Tony and Shai assumed this was coincidence or natural variation. But when the same improvement occurred consistently over the next 2 weeks, they realized that Tony's preparation methods were having a genuine impact on Shai's shooting performance. Tony, I don't know what you're doing to these balls, but they feel perfect every single time, Shai told him after a practice where he had made 47 of 50 shots during his warm-up routine. It's like the ball knows what I want it to do before I even release it. Tony was thrilled that his methods were working, but he was also becoming increasingly concerned about the elaborate nature of his ritual and the amount of time it required. Shai, I need to tell you something about how I prepare your basketballs. The process takes about 4 hours and some of the techniques I use are unconventional. I'm worried that if other people find out about the specifics, they'll think I've gone too far. Shai's response revealed how much he valued Tony's commitment to equipment perfection, regardless of how unusual his methods might seem to others. "Tony, I don't care if you have to sacrifice chickens to make these balls feel this good. Whatever you're doing is working, and that's all that matters to me. If other people think it's excessive, that's their problem." This conversation gave Tony the confidence to continue developing his basketball preparation ritual, but it also marked the beginning of a secret that would eventually involve elaborate scheduling, covert equipment storage, and careful coordination to ensure that no one discovered the full extent of Tony's obsessive preparation methods. However, what happened when other Thunder players began noticing the difference in Shai's warm-up basketballs would test Tony's ability to maintain his secret while managing increasing demands for his specialized preparation services. During a practice in November 2021, Josh Giddey picked up the basketball that Shai had been using for warm-ups and immediately noticed that it felt different from the standard balls the team used for regular practice. "Shai, this ball feels incredible," Josh said as he took a few practice shots. "Where did this come from?" Shai looked at Tony, unsure how much he should reveal about the elaborate preparation process. "Tony prepares my warm-up balls to specific specifications. He's really particular about air pressure and temperature conditioning." Josh made his next 5 shots in a row using Shai's ball, then immediately approached Tony with a request. "Tony, is there any way you could prepare a ball like this for me? I can definitely feel the difference and it's affecting my shooting rhythm." Tony was faced with a dilemma. Josh's request was reasonable, but fulfilling it would mean doubling his preparation workload and increasing the risk that someone would discover the full extent of his elaborate ritual. "Josh, I can definitely prepare a ball to your specifications, but it requires some advanced planning and specific preparation time. Let me work out the logistics and get back to you." This conversation marked the beginning of what would eventually become Tony's greatest challenge, managing the growing demand for his specialized basketball preparation while maintaining the secrecy that allowed him to work without scrutiny or interference. Over the next 3 months, Tony developed individualized basketball preparation protocols for 5 different Thunder players, each requiring slightly different specifications and preparation techniques. Tony's workload increased from 4 hours per day to nearly 12 hours, requiring him to arrive at the arena at midnight and work until practice began. But what happened when Tony's exhaustion began affecting his health and job performance would force him to make a decision about whether to continue his elaborate secret or find a way to make his methods more sustainable and transparent. By February 2022, Tony was averaging 4 hours of sleep per night and showing signs of burnout that concerned his colleagues and family. His wife had begun asking questions about his work schedule, and Thunder coaches had noticed that Tony seemed exhausted during normal working hours. "Tony, you look terrible," Thunder assistant coach Mike Wilkes told him after a particularly grueling preparation session. "Are you okay? Is there something about this job that's causing you stress?" Tony was caught between his commitment to providing perfect equipment and his need to maintain some semblance of work-life balance. He realized that his current approach was unsustainable, but he was also terrified of disappointing the players who had come to depend on his specialized preparation. "I'm fine, coach. Just adjusting to the demands of the job and trying to make sure our guys have everything they need to succeed." But that night, as Tony began another midnight preparation session, he had to confront the reality that his secret was becoming impossible to maintain without seriously damaging his health and relationships. However, what happened when Tony finally decided to reveal his methods to the Thunder coaching staff would lead to organizational changes that validated his approach while making it more sustainable and systematic. After a particularly difficult week where Tony had fallen asleep during a team meeting due to exhaustion, he made the decision to request a private conversation with head coach Mark Daigneault about his equipment preparation methods. "Coach, I need to tell you about some unconventional techniques I've been using to prepare basketballs for our players. The methods are effective, but they're also time-intensive and require some unusual protocols." Tony explained his entire basketball preparation ritual, from the precise air pressure measurements to the texture conditioning to the energy charging process. He expected skepticism or concern about his methods, but Coach Daigneault's response surprised him. "Tony, what you're describing sounds like the kind of attention to detail that separates championship organizations from everyone else. If these methods are improving our players' shooting confidence and performance, then we need to figure out how to support them properly." Coach Daigneault immediately arranged for Tony to present his methods to the entire coaching staff and front office, with the goal of creating organizational support for equipment preparation that went beyond industry standards. The presentation Tony gave to Thunder management would become legendary within the organization and eventually influence how NBA teams across the league approached equipment preparation and player support services. What Tony has developed isn't just equipment management, General Manager Sam Presti told the assembled staff after Tony's presentation. It's performance enhancement through environmental control. If we can give our players consistent, optimized equipment that builds their confidence and supports their natural abilities, that's a competitive advantage that doesn't show up in traditional analytics. The Thunder organization immediately approved funding for additional equipment preparation staff, specialized storage facilities, and the tools necessary to scale Tony's methods across the entire roster. But what happened when news of the Thunder's magic ball preparation methods began circulating around the NBA would demonstrate how Tony's obsessive perfectionism had accidentally created innovations that other teams desperately wanted to understand and implement. Within 6 months of the Thunder's decision to formally support Tony's methods, equipment managers from 8 different NBA teams had contacted the organization requesting information about their basketball preparation protocols. "We're hearing rumors about specialized equipment preparation that's affecting shooting performance," one equipment manager told Tony during a conference call. "Is there any way you could share some insights about your techniques?" Tony was initially reluctant to share information that had taken him years to develop and refine, but the Thunder organization encouraged him to position their innovations as industry leadership that could benefit player performance across the league. "Tony, what you've created represents a new standard for equipment support," Thunder owner Clay Bennett told him during a meeting about sharing techniques with other teams. "We should be proud to lead the league in supporting our players at this level of detail." This conversation led to Tony being invited to present his methods at the NBA Equipment Managers Conference, where his techniques would be introduced to the entire league and establish new standards for basketball preparation protocols. However, what happened during Tony's presentation at the conference would reveal how his secret obsession had accidentally created a revolution in equipment management that extended far beyond basketball preparation. Tony's presentation, titled Precision Equipment Preparation: The Interface Between Tools and Performance, was attended by equipment managers from all 30 NBA teams, as well as representatives from other professional sports leagues who had heard about the Thunder's innovations. "Equipment preparation has traditionally focused on maintenance and availability," Tony began his presentation. "But what we've learned is that precision preparation can actually enhance performance by creating consistency and confidence that allows athletes to focus entirely on their skills rather than adapting to equipment variations." Tony demonstrated his basketball preparation techniques, explaining the scientific reasoning behind each step and showing performance data that documented the improvements in shooting consistency when players used properly prepared equipment. The response from his colleagues was immediately enthusiastic, with multiple equipment managers requesting detailed protocols and asking about adapting similar techniques for other sports and equipment types. "Tony, what you've shown us changes everything about how we think about our role," said Miami Heat equipment manager John Steinberg. "We're not just maintaining equipment, we're creating tools that can enhance performance through precision and consistency." But the most significant outcome of Tony's conference presentation would be its influence on sports science research and the development of new technologies for equipment optimization. Dr. Sarah Chin, a sports performance researcher from Stanford University who attended Tony's presentation, immediately recognized the broader implications of his work. "Tony, what you've developed represents a new field of study, the relationship between equipment precision and athletic confidence," Dr. Chin told him after his presentation. "Would you be interested in collaborating on research that could validate and expand these techniques scientifically?" This conversation led to a formal research partnership between the Thunder organization and Stanford Sports Performance Lab, with Tony's basketball preparation methods serving as the foundation for studies that would influence equipment protocols across multiple sports and performance levels. The research conducted over the next 2 years would validate Tony's intuitive understanding that equipment consistency directly affects athletic confidence, and that precision preparation can measurably improve performance outcomes. But what happened when the results of this research were published would establish Tony as a pioneer in a new field of sports science and transform his secret obsession into industry-standard best practices. The Stanford study, published in the Journal of Applied Sports Psychology, demonstrated that athletes using Tony's precision-prepared equipment showed measurable improvements in confidence levels, consistency of technique, and performance outcomes compared to athletes using standard equipment preparation methods. The Rodriguez protocol, as Tony's methods became known in the research community, was shown to improve shooting confidence by an average of 23% and reduce performance anxiety related to equipment variability by 31%. The study's findings led to immediate adoption of similar techniques by professional teams across multiple sports, and Tony began receiving consulting requests from Olympic training programs, college athletics departments, and even amateur sports organizations looking to implement precision equipment preparation. Tony, what started as your personal commitment to perfection has become a new standard for athletic support, Dr. Chen told him during the study's publication announcement. You've proven that the details everyone else thought were insignificant are actually fundamental to peak performance. 3 years after Tony first began his secret 4-hour basketball preparation ritual, he was named the NBA's Equipment Manager of the Year and invited to speak at conferences around the world about the connection between equipment precision and athletic performance. During his acceptance speech for the award, Tony reflected on how his obsessive attention to detail had accidentally created innovations that were now being used to support athletes at every level of competition. When I started preparing basketballs at 2:30 in the morning, I thought I was probably going too far, Tony told the assembled audience of sports professionals. But what I learned is that there's no such thing as too much attention to detail when it comes to supporting elite performance. Every element of an athlete's environment, including the equipment they use, either supports their confidence or undermines it. Tony concluded his speech by acknowledging Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, whose trust in unconventional methods had allowed the development of techniques that were now helping athletes worldwide. Shai believed that equipment could be more than just functional, it could be optimized to enhance performance and build confidence. That belief gave me permission to pursue perfection in ways that others might have considered excessive, and the result has been validation that details matter more than anyone previously understood. Years later, when young equipment managers asked Tony for advice about building successful careers, he would always tell them about the night he first decided to spend 4 hours preparing a single basketball. Excellence in any field comes from caring about details that other people think are unimportant, Tony would explain. The equipment managers who make the biggest difference are the ones who understand that their job isn't just maintaining gear, it's creating tools that help athletes perform at their absolute best. And in his office at the Paycom Center, Tony kept the first basketball he had ever prepared using his elaborate protocol, along with a note from Shai that read, "To Tony, thank you for proving that perfection is possible when someone cares enough to pursue it." The equipment manager who knew Shai's secret routine had discovered that his obsessive attention to detail wasn't a personality flaw, it was exactly what elite athletes needed to perform at their highest level. And sometimes the most important innovations come from people who refuse to accept that good enough is sufficient when excellence is possible.